We started with a small group of indie rockers committed to anarchy and poverty, and they didn't make a great core group. They didn't organize or give well, much to my surprise. We met only in the evenings because we could not afford a place for our new burgeoning church. It was very small at the time. I like to say about the size of a Mormon family. It wasn't a big church. And I was really struggling at this time. This will happen for about an hour, and then I'll close in prayer. But I was really struggling at the time trying to figure out how to do church. I did not know what I was doing. I loved Jesus and I believed in the Bible, but I didn't know what I was doing. And then I got a call from an organization called Leadership Network run by a friend of mine named Bob Buford. And he brings together various Christian leaders around various issues so that they can network and meet one another and share resources. And it wasn't he who called, but a representative of the organization called and said, hey, we're doing a young leaders conference for young pastors. Would you like to come? And to be honest with you, I had never met a young pastor, and I didn't know there were pastors' conferences. I said, really, there's pastors' conferences. Explain that. He said, well, we bring together pastors so they can share ideas. I was like, what a great idea. A pastors' conference, and it's for young pastors, which meant you were under 50, So I went. And I went to meet with some of these young pastors, and it became something called the Young Leader Network out of Leadership Network. And so we began meeting together and discussing, and I met some good guys, and we did a few conferences, and then all of a sudden we did a big event at Mount Hermon in Northern California, and I believe it was in 1997. And they asked me to give a keynote speech because at this point we were running like 80, and with that kind of revolutionary change, who wouldn't want a guy with that kind of resume? So I showed up, and my minor in college was my minor was in basically philosophy and epistemology, and I looked at Descartes' epistemology and the transition between the modern and the postmodern world. So I got up and I lectured on the shift from modernism to postmodernism, on how the issue wasn't generational, but it was actually worldview shift. And then it exploded. The radio stations started calling and the magazines, and all of a sudden I got a little bit of, pride, arrogance, self-righteousness. Thought I was pretty cool. Thought I was hip and smart. I got to travel some with this team. Much of what I said was out of anger and self-righteousness and pride. Much of it was insecurity as a young guy trying to prove himself, overcompensating with arrogance and pride. And in the middle of that, the network kept growing, and the touring kept growing, and the buzz kept growing, and I was away from home too much. First 3 years of the church, I didn't get paid by the church. I was raising support from the outside, so I started speaking a lot to pay my salary and to cover my wife, who was pregnant with our child. At this time as well, they hired a man named Doug Padgett to run that network, someone I didn't know. Pretty soon he had brought on another man named Tony Jones, and then they added a man named Brian McLaren. Also loosely affiliated with this team was a man named Dan Kimball, and other men like Chris C., and there were these various men. And shortly thereafter I saw that the conversation among these men was transitioning to discussions of, does God know the future? Does gender really come with distinctions? Is homosexuality a sin? Are we sinners by nature? Do we need to keep the doctrine of the Trinity because it keeps us distant from other religions? And at this point, I became completely disenfranchised. I love these men, and they're all friends. They're all men who have never personally sinned against me. They're all men that have been very kind to me. But I realized that the direction that they were looking theologically was simply not a place that I was willing to go. I was 25. I'd been a Christian, maybe 26 at this point. I'd been a Christian since 19 without formal theological education, but I did have enough theological conviction that I didn't like where it was going. In addition to that, I realized that the way I was handling it was just wicked. That rather than having a good winsome case or counter case, I would just cuss them out. I would use foul language. I would have a very bad temper, and I didn't in any way represent Christ. And I was immature and unprepared to be at that level. And my church needed my time, and my wife needed my time, and my baby needed my time, so I came home. And that morphed into something called Terra Nova for a short bit, and I think they thanked Chris C. and I on the front page of that first website for founding the movement. And I called him and I said, please don't use my name. I love you, but don't tell anyone. And And then that morphed into something called the Emergent Village. And all of a sudden, what I saw is that issues of contextualization and missiology and the role of the church for Christ in culture have become the hot issue. Now, this was a discussion that began 10 years ago among a handful of young guys having these sort of conversations. And it has morphed now into what I will say is three teams. I have not lectured on this issue widely. I haven't talked about it widely, I think for a few reasons. One, I wasn't ready. And I'm not saying that I am. We'll see. I believe I was jealous and proud and arrogant and self-righteous and mean-spirited. Secondly, these are men that, for the most part, I know and I care for and I love. Men that I've had into my home, men I've been in their home, I know their children. Our relationship has become distant in recent years for reasons pertaining to the missions and the theologies that we've adhered to. But what I see now is three teams, and I know that some of you are here to try and figure out which team I'm on, and some of you are here to figure out which team you're on, and some of you are here because you're simply fundamentalist, legalistic, moralistic critics looking for rocks to throw. And some of you are altogether confused and wondering what team you should be on. I will say that, in my opinion, out of that original network, there has birthed essentially three streams. Some of these terms I'll steal from Dr. Stetzer. The first I'll call the relevance. These are the cool church crowd. These are people who generally hold evangelical doctrine. They believe in the Bible and Jesus and the Trinity and heaven and hell and we're all sinners and there's no salvation apart from Jesus. They're not trying to necessarily rewrite Christian theology, but they are trying to innovate Christian methods of ministry. Some of the better known writers and influencers in that stream are men like Dan Kimball, whom I know personally and I've asked a number of very hard theological questions to, and he is a man who fits within the boundaries of evangelicalism. One of the more popular writers that has come up in that stream is Donald Miller. His book, Blue Like Jazz, is essentially a deconstructionist book, which is the essence of postmodernism, whereby it critiques the modern and evangelical church. I've known Donald for a number of years, and insofar as I can tell, he still fits comfortably within that sort of stream of being evangelical. You may not agree with everything that these men would say, but you also wouldn't have any cause, insofar as I know, to accuse them of any false teaching or heresy. They're not at that level in any way. Probably these men don't fit in the what is now known as the emerging church. But men like Erwin McManus and John Burke, they are men who have influence, and they're kind of that same position of holding an evangelical theology and trying to have new ministry methods that are updated to reach a new world. Secondly, there are revisionists, and this is where I will spend a lot of my time. And in this, it's really hard for me. I don't want to be the man who is known by what he's against. I don't want to be the man who is known by what he's angry about, though I do get angry. And I don't want to be the man who is being unnecessarily unpleasant to men who have been pleasant to me. But in this revisionist stream, what I see is among the particular emergent village, which is a sort of an aspect of what is the overarching emerging church. And that term emerging church, by the way, comes from Dan Kimball, who took it from Leadership Network. They had, in our young leader meetings, they said that they were advanced scouts for the emerging church. And